Hello and welcome back. This is the second part of the video tutorial on using AI for ancestral storytelling. We left at this point in my slide presentation with a task for you for the day. And we're going to use Claude Sonnet for the task. And a reminder that these are the 4 steps that we're going to use, showing on the left. Find your anchor, extract micro details, build a scene, and then do some fact checking. We're going to select a single primary record. And today I've chosen a ship's manifest. We're going to identify 3 micro details that we can extract, and then ask Claude to write a 3-line sensory paragraph using one AI prompt, as you can see below. And then we can use that response, that piece of text, mark what is speculative, add one source citation, and include it in our story. So my story is about Thomas Hugh Savage, who sailed on the SS Montclair from Liverpool in 1925 to arrive at St. John in New Brunswick a little over a week later. I have the original document, which is the ship's manifest for the Montclair, as you can see on the left. Very dense, small, typed and handwritten document. And this image is the way in which I can visualize what it might have been like for him on board the Montclair as he was leaving, generated by AI, of course. So the line in the manifest reveals that Thomas Hugh Savage, aged 20, farm labourer, and his last address was Railway Cottage. Actually, last address is incorrect. That should read his birthplace, which was Railway Cottage, Penally, South Wales. So I now want to show you what AI can do to help me unravel some of this. I'm in my account for Claude, and I'm using the latest Claude Sonnet 4.5, and I have my conversation inside a project for October. And this is the current conversation that I've had about the ship's manifest. So as you can see, I've uploaded the image, and then my prompt identified some of the key facts and asked it to extract details for Thomas at line 18. Actually, I had read that incorrectly. It was actually line 15, but it managed nevertheless. Inside my project, I also uploaded some previous research notes, so it knows quite a bit about this family. So in responding to that request, it's given me a nice opening line, or a hook, if you like, that we could use in our story. A young farmhand from the Welsh Valleys, barely 20 years old, stood at the rail of the SS Montclair as it steamed away from Liverpool on March 27, 1925. Then it goes into some details about Thomas. The departure, which is correct. The arrival, correct. The ship identifies that it's part of the Canadian Pacific Line. Personal details, his name, and his middle name is just reduced to the initial H. Age 20, origin, South Wales. Occupation, farm labourer, and that is visible in the manifest. And the last UK address, that should read his birthplace, Railway Cottage, Penally, South Wales. And then it goes on to give me a little bit about the immigration context, about what it was like for this young man. And then asks a number of questions for me, or poses some research opportunities for me, such as, would you like me to help you with a sensory description of the 8-day Atlantic voyage? That's a good clue for me to give it the next prompt. Or could we develop the emotional weight of Thomas carrying his mother's memory across the ocean? And this is pertinent because his mother died young, and there's another story attached to that. Or could we research the hopes and uncertainties of a young Welsh farmhand seeking his fortune? And there's another story brewing here, how this journey unknowingly set the stage for meeting his future wife, Emily, who had sailed the same route just 1 year earlier. Then goes on to say the manifest also offers potential leads for deeper research. Examining other passengers on the same voyage might reveal whether Thomas travelled with acquaintances from Pembrokeshire, or if there were other agricultural workers from Wales aboard who might have formed a support network in Canada. Now, there are a couple of ideas that I had not thought of in scrutinising this document. So let's have a closer look at the 1925 manifest for SS Montclair. It's a little blurry to read, but here is line 15 for Savage Thomas. He's age 20, he's single. His birthplace is Penally. Not sure what that reads, something certificate there. And here, Canada government. And then further across, Department of Immigration. Let's go back into that. And here's a pertinent piece of information right there in that column, next to Department of Immigration and Colonisation for Toronto, which is where he's heading. It lists his nearest relative, who is his grandfather, Mr. W. Evans. Not sure where the W comes in because his grandfather was Joseph Job. However, Trefloyne Farm, Penally, Pembroke, is where he lived prior to coming to Canada. So it verifies for me that this is the right person on this manifest. So we're now back in Claude, where you can see that I have another conversation about the dockside farewell for Thomas Hugh Evans. Thomas Hugh Savage, that should read. However, it has written it correctly in its response below. And the prompt is asking for a 3-line sensory scene for his dockside farewell. And it reads, the salt wind off the Mersey cut through his worn coat as he stood on the quayside, one hand gripping a battered suitcase that held everything he owned. That cold March morning in 1925, 20-year-old Thomas Hugh Savage, farmhand, orphan, and now emigrant, waited to board the Montclair, leaving behind the only family he had ever truly known. So that's a great sensory scene for us, just a little over 3 lines. And then it goes on to expand upon that and to write about more of his life From the documents that I've already shared with Claude in this project file system. And it's given me a story about this young man from Trefloyne. And here we pick up on the details about the tragedy of his mother's death. He died in the sea off Tenby near Caldy Island. The coroner's verdict was death by suicide during temporary insanity. And this was 1918, a few years before his departure. But then it goes on to write more about this sensory scene that I might use in my storytelling for him. The first draft, which is a modern sensory scene, and then rewritten in a Welsh narrative style. And this is sounding a little better. The sharp scent of sea salt mingled with the heavy smoke from the funnels of the Montclair, whilst overhead the gulls circled and cried out their discordant chorus. The wind from the Mersey, damp and chill, as only a March wind can be, tugged at his threadbare coat. I would get rid of the word Welsh there because we're now in England. But then it goes on to describe a little more about him to give us more sensory input. In his callous hand, and yes, they would be, hands that had known the leather of plough reins and the rough manes of farm horses since boyhood, he gripped a battered suitcase and then describes the content of the suitcase and reiterates the line from the manifest. So it's given me quite a lot to think about in writing up his story. It's then gone on to give me some historical context. This is important to set the scene for our readers. The Great Migration of the 1920s, after the Great War, Wales faced significant economic challenges. Between 1919 and 1930, over 1 million people emigrated from Britain to Canada. For Thomas, the decision to leave must have been wrenching. Then goes on to describe a little bit about life on board Montclair. It was a ship that could carry 1,600 passengers in 3 classes. And as a farm labourer travelling on an assisted passage scheme, Thomas would have been berthed in 3rd class, dormitory-style accommodations in the lower decks, shared washing facilities and meals served at long communal tables. Then further on, what the records tell us. These are speculative, but are very interesting perspectives that I hadn't imagined. What the official documents cannot capture is the emotional weight of that moment. A young man who had already survived the loss of his mother, the absence of his father, and years of hard labour on a Welsh farm, now stepping into an unknown future across an ocean. Then goes on to ask if I'd like help to explore further. Perhaps a detail of Thomas's journey across the Atlantic, his path from St. John to Toronto, the wider Evans family context, or investigate the Emily May Wilkinson's parallel story and research the historical context more deeply, specifically about conditions in rural Wales in 1920s. Which direction would I find most valuable for my course materials? So then it gives me citations and sources, contextual research sources, and then a suggested challenge, which is what I ask for you to do. You could use this Thomas story as a model. Choose one ancestor from your family who emigrated or made a significant journey. Find their richest record, a passenger list, a census entry just before departure, or a letter describing their plans, and then use the 4-step method to write a 200-word narrative scene of their departure or arrival. So we want to ground it in documented facts and layer in historical context about that specific time and place. Cite your sources and share it with others. So Claude has come up with not just a response to my initial query, but a whole process that I'm able now to share with you. I do advocate that you use projects within Claude to keep all of your conversations together. As you can see, here are the conversations that I've had on this particular project on the left-hand side. And on the right, you can see the documents that I've uploaded into its project knowledge. This makes a huge difference to how Claude can answer your prompts. So coming back now to our presentation, this is where we began today, and I do invite you to have a go at using Claude Sonnet 4.5 to write your story